We're going to have a lot of fun in this video because it's about bendy bones. Yay! Bendy bones are awesome. With this feature, bones in Blender can be segmented and curve without the need of actually adding additional bones. This means you can easily create nice smooth curves like this. And as far as I'm aware, Blender is the only software that can actually do this, which is a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's great that Blender can do this, but it's something you need to be aware of if you ever plan to export your rig or animation with bendy bones into another software package. If you're exporting the bones, it will likely just function like a normal non-bendy bone, just like in any other software. It is possible to actually export the animated mesh. That will work fine, although you won't be able to edit the animation because there is no actual rig. Okay, enough with the disclaimers, Wayne. Let me show you how bendy bones work. Now, any bone can actually be a bendy bone. You just need to click on your bone, go over to the bone tab, and then you have the bendy bone segment. All you need to do is raise this above 1, and it will be a bendy bone. Now, there's a few more things you need to get it to work, which I'll explain in a moment, but to actually see it bend, you need to be in B-bone display mode. Otherwise, it's just going to display in a straight line like this. Let's have a look at a few more settings. So here we've got the segments. You can see when I drag this up, it's going to add and lower the amount of segments to my bones here. The display size here, this is the X-axis and the Y-axis, so I'll just make this one a little bit bigger. This is just going to change the visual display of our bone here. You can make it bigger or smaller in the viewport. This is just for display purposes. You can move them independently, so you can have the X-axis go separately to the Z-axis. You can move them both together, or you can type in any number in here. There's also a keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Alt-S, and then you can scale it bigger or smaller to your heart's content. And I'll just reiterate, this doesn't do anything practical to the rig other than change the display size. So it's just for visual purposes. Now those settings actually work the same in edit mode or pose mode. So it doesn't matter which mode that you're in, when you adjust them, they're going to be synced. But most of the next settings, it does actually matter what mode that you're in. So let me reiterate what the modes are for. Edit mode is for setting up your armature, and pose mode is for animation. Let's have a look at the curve in, the curve out, and the roll in and out. If we adjust these in edit mode, we are permanently changing the starting position for these properties. Whereas if we change them in pose mode, we're actually just animating these changes. So that goes for all of these ones here, as well as the scaling in, the scaling out, and the easing in. And the other settings that I haven't mentioned yet, the inherit end roll and these handles down here, they actually work the same in both modes as well. So that might be a little bit confusing to you, but just remember this. Edit mode is for setting things up, and pose mode is for animating things, and you'll never go wrong. All right, so let's have a look at what these settings actually do now. Now with the curve in, X and Y, and the curve out, this is how you create a curve in your bone on those specific axes. So the Y will move it in one direction, and the X will move it in the other. And if you did it in edit mode, this is permanently changing the starting position. Whereas if you did it in pose mode, this is where you'd be animating it. Well, you don't really need to animate these because you can take care of all the bending with your controls. So you don't really need to worry about these ones too much. The advantage of being able to control the starting bend for these bones is meant for those situations where you have a natural bend in a mesh that you're trying to rig. You can adjust your settings to start with a curved edit bone. But to be honest, I haven't been able to really see a noticeable improvement in doing this. So this is not something that I bother with myself. I just take care of all the bending with the controls when I'm doing the animation. And that seems to work fine for me. The roll in and out should be self-explanatory. We can create a twist on our bone here at the start and the end. But this is another setting that I don't play with. Now the inherit end roll is a little bit confusingly named. With this one enabled, it will inherit the end roll of the previous bone. If I select this bone here and then change the roll value here, you can see that that's now inherited up the chain. If I disable this, you'll notice that it goes back to default. So possibly a better name for this would be inherit start roll, but I do understand it because it's inheriting the end roll of the start handle. Yeah. Now the scale in and out is another pretty easy one to understand. If we grab these and move them together, you can see that we're scaling the start of our bone. And if we grab the end ones, we're scaling the end of our bones. We can go up or down. So again, I haven't found a real advantage in deviating from the default settings in edit mode, but if we jump over into pose mode, these things are really handy to be able to be animated. Now, I wouldn't suggest animating them by hand, but what you can do is actually set up some drivers on these values to one of the other controls. And then it makes it really usable for animation. I can't specifically show you in this course how to do that, but here in this rig, you can see that I'm just driving that value based on the scale of our control bone. So there's a little bit of a challenge for you to figure out how I've done that. So with our ease in and out, we can actually decide how bendy the bone is going to be at the start and at the end of the bone. So it's easy if I just jump into pose mode and show you what I mean. So I'm just going to lower down our ease value from the in, and you'll notice that it becomes less bendy at the start. And we can even increase the bend at the end to make the end more bendy. Now I'm just going to reset that and show you actually how it works in conjunction with edit mode. So if you jump into edit mode, the default settings are 1, which means that the start and the end are at a bendiness, if you will, of the value of 1. If I lower this down to say 0 and then jump back into pose mode, you'll notice that I have destroyed that bend. You can think about it as the edit mode settings get added to the pose mode settings to create the final result here. And that's the way that the ease in and out works. Now the magic behind these bendy bones are actually down here in the handles. We actually need a start handle and an end handle to compute the bending of our bone that's actually our bendy bone. So here when we click our little menu open, you can see we've got 4 to choose from. We've got automatic, absolute, relative, and tangent. Now the automatic value, if we hover over here, you'll see the tooltip. It uses the connected parent of our children to compute the handle. So in this little example here, I'm just going to jump over to octahedral mode. You'll see that the bones all flow in this direction and actually parented together. So this one is a child of this one, and this one is a child of this one. Whereas in all of these other examples, there's no parenting going on. We'll get to those in a moment. Back to B-bone mode. So with our start handle at automatic and our end handle at automatic, we can jump to pose mode and then animate these handles around, and our bendy bone is going to follow. So we can grab this guy and move him around. And we can't actually grab this one because he is the parent. He is going to move the whole entire chain. If we want to grab this one and have it actually control the bend, we need a different setup, either using parenting or one of the other options. Let me just reset everything and take a look at our next handle type. I can change this value from automatic over to absolute. I'll do that to both the start and the end handles. Then we get this option here for any bone to become that custom handle. So our start handle, I'm going to choose the absolute in. That's going to be this bone here, is going to be our start handle. And then for the out handle, we're going to choose absolute out, which is this one over here. And this is what I wanted to show you. Now these handle bones are not actually parented in this chain, so we can just move them around freely. If they are parented, it just actually works like the automatic way. But because they're free, you can see that our bendy bone is now tracking to this handle. And the end handle actually tracks towards the tail of our handle bone. And the start of our bendy bone actually tracks towards the head of that bone. Now, I actually think this should be swapped around, but that doesn't really matter because I rarely use these absolute handle types when they're not parented like this. Now, I've already gone ahead and set up the remaining handle types just to save a little bit of time. Let's have a look at the next option, the relative handles. Now, these relative handles are very, very buggy, and I would also suggest not using this one. And actually in the manual, it says that it's buggy as well. But basically what it's meant to do is use this as the relative starting point. So when we rotate it and move it around, it's actually meant to move relative to that point. But in my view, it just doesn't function in any usable way. So I would suggest not using this relative handle at all because of the bugginess. This tangent option over here, however, is excellent. So with this option, it doesn't actually care where these bones are. They can be anywhere in space, but it's just going to follow the tangent or the rotation of this bone. And this is very handy. So we can put these anywhere and have it do the bending. So the tangent handles here are excellent for those situations where you can't just have the bones parented straight like this. That would be my suggestions. If you can do straight parenting like this, go with automatic. If you can't do straight parenting, then choose the tangent options. These ones are awesome. Here's just a couple of tips before we call this lesson finished. Now, what if we wanted to ignore the bending here on, say, the start point here? Well, we can actually do that with the handle here. We just change it from the automatic over to the other ones. And if we leave this handle blank, it's not going to actually bend because there is no handle for it to get the information from. So that's a really quick way of disabling the bending on one end, if that's something that you needed to do. And here's how to solve the number one problem that you're probably going to run into when using these bendy bones. So I actually want to make this bone called bone a bendy bone. I'm really good at saying the word bone. So I select it and then I slide my segments up here to whatever I want. The maximum is 32. And I get this weird twist going on. That's got to do with our bone roll. So let me just turn on our axes for the moment. So our handle in has the z-axis pointing backwards, and our handle out has a z-axis pointing forwards. So this is why it's twisting. So let's just have a look at our handle in. You can see that the roll is 180. If I make them so that they're both the same, where the z-axis is pointing in the same direction, that's going to remove that awful twist. So there we go. When you run into that issue, you now know how to solve it.